Hello, folks. Welcome to the Manly Pinterest Tips Show and Podcast. I'm Jeff C., and you're not. We've got a great show for you today. I'm going to be talking with Raman Sehgal from HollaG about Pinterest and the big game. So, Raman is the VP of Marketing for HollaG, which means he helps drive success and growth for the brand marketers from HollaG's unique Pinterest marketing solution. Before spending 10 plus years leading digital and media strategy for some of the world's biggest brands at Procter & Gamble and Dannon, Raman spent his youth as a graphic web designer and computer engineer, combining all those experiences with those he continues as a world traveler. Raman sees content powered by data and insights as a means to unlock genuine connections between people and brands, and he's based right now in New York. So, Raman, thanks so much for being here with us today.
Glad to be here, man. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, and so everyone who stopped by to watch the show live with us, if you would go ahead and start leaving your comments or questions for Raman in the on the event page in the comments, we'll try to bring those up and hopefully answer those for you today. So we're just going to. Oh, and I really appreciate if you guys would head over to manlypinteresttips.com and go ahead and sign up for the email newsletter, be part of our email community, so you'll know when these great guests show up and we can ask them questions here live. So I appreciate if you guys would do that. So. Let's just jump right into the first question. Raman, I'd like to know your background a little bit better. Can you give us a little bit of your story, how you came to be VP of Marketing at HollaG?
Yeah, sure. So as you kind of summarized, I've spent most of my career as a brand and digital marketing manager, working at companies like P&G and Dannon Yogurt, working on some of the world's biggest brands, getting to work both in the U.S. and other countries. And what got me into digital marketing, I was a computer engineer by training. I did web design on the side for beer and travel money. So then I got into this digital marketing thing and just really started understanding that digital isn't just a shiny object. The whole world is starting to become more digitally connected, and it makes, frankly, our lives more meaningful and connected. After about 10 years of doing, call it, tech and media strategy for big marketing brands, I decided I wanted to flip that on its head and start taking everything I learned about marketing and media and apply it to technology. So, I thought maybe I'll go work for Google or Facebook, maybe I'll start my own thing. But then I ran into my close friend, Bob Gilbreth, who's co-founder of HollaG, and the company was just in its infancy. He was just starting working with another great guy, our co-founder, Michael Wolschlager, a data scientist. And he was like, I'm doing this cool thing on Pinterest. You got to hear about it. And I was like, Pinterest? That's for girls and recipes. What's that about? And, over the course of this flight with my friend and mentor, Bob, he started telling me about the impact that Pinterest can make on people's lives. Bob actually wrote a book called Marketing with Meaning. As HollaG, we're ex-brand marketers, data geeks, but people who just want to make a meaningful impact, make a positive dent in the marketing world. So I really kind of bought into the vision early, saw the power of Pinterest, and then made the jump. So I came in early, one of the first 10 employees, where we're keeping the lights on, trying to prove this crazy vision and mission about Pinterest 2 years ago when no one really understands Pinterest. As we've grown as a company, we have a team here in New York City, company's based in Cincinnati, Ohio, but we have offices in Europe, on the West Coast, in Chicago. As we built out our client teams and our brand-facing teams and our sales teams, the shift has really been, okay, we've got a lot of interesting information. How do we start sharing it? Whether it's trend reports, interesting insights, best practices, how do we use marketing to add value to people's lives, marketers, small businesses, about Pinterest? Because ultimately that's what's going to drive our expertise in our brand.
Awesome, awesome. So can you explain for somebody who, a small business or a blogger or something, what exactly is HollaG and how it kind of fits in with Pinterest?
Yeah, sure. So at HollaG, what we are is we help brands source, optimize, and amplify their content for scale success on Pinterest. Pinterest is, it is a social network, but it's less like Facebook and it's more like Google. People are using Pinterest to discover great content, seek inspiration on things they want to do in their life. Whether it's my wife and I talking on GChat, and she's probably going to ping me in the middle of this call, asking about what we're making for dinner tonight, or my wife and I planning our vacation, or a woman planning her wedding, or a guy planning how to look great for his next interview. So what we do with brands, big brands and small businesses, especially small content creators, is we give them the tools and the assets to do great marketing on Pinterest. Again, how do you optimize your own content? How do you source great external content? And how do you continuously monitor and test lots of things on Pinterest?
Gotcha. So you kind of, it sounds like kind of the same thing. I came to Pinterest kind of the back way because I thought, first it was for women, but then I found out how much traffic it started to drive into a kind of a new blog that I was running. So how did you, what did you love about Pinterest when you first got started? Kind of what got you interested once you kind of got that initial push in the platform?
Yeah, I think men kind of and women have stereotypically sometimes a little bit different behaviors on the internet in general, right? Men, we like to collect things and show off. So if you look at a cursory glance at my Pinterest page, it's a lot of stuff about the new Avengers movies, Star Wars, comic books, a little bit of sports, a little bit of recipes, some stuff for the new apartment my wife and I are hunting around for. But women are collecting great content because they're thinking about the future more proactively than me. My wife is thinking about what she wants to cook for dinner next month. I'm thinking about what I got to make for dinner tonight because there's broccoli in the fridge.
Right.
What I found is guys come into Pinterest one of two ways, and this is just kind of my opinion and my observation. They come in early because they want to collect and archive and show things off, which is great. Like, again, that's the Star Wars and the comic book stuff you're going to see on my Pinterest page. And then they start to discover other things like, oh yeah, I'm thinking about doing a backpacking trip in Mexico. What are some tips for that? They start using it like a search engine to find solutions and inspiration. On the other side, we see a lot of more guys coming in, and what's driving some of this growth on Pinterest is because of their partner. The example I made earlier, my wife and I are thinking we're going to move into a bigger apartment in a couple of years. We haven't even started scoping out apartments or neighborhoods yet. But you better believe we're already looking at furniture, right? Like, we got to throw out the old couch and find this new one. Or a colleague of mine at work just got engaged. Her fiance is joint planning on their secret wedding board right now. So guys come in from their partners, but then start to discover their own utility in their life. Or maybe guys already found out the utility and are just using it. And we're starting to see a lot of other categories start to pop on Pinterest because of that.
Yeah, that's interesting because a friend of mine who's a blogger, and we talk back and forth. Well, he's redoing his office, and he's decorating it in steampunk Star Wars, which I didn't even know was a thing. But there's huge pins about it, about people who made these steampunk Star Wars lamps and lights, and so that's another thing I think is so cool is Pinterest is kind of that discovery engine where you find stuff that you didn't even know existed, but still really cool. And I think you're right on point with guys finding stuff out like, oh, I was pinning something for the new Avengers trailer because I wanted to keep a record of it, but oh, there's all this other stuff too. So I think you're right on with kind of that discovery network. So the other question I was gonna jump right into was you wrote a great article recently about getting started with promoted pins. How important do you think this? It's rolled out to I think everyone now. How important that will be for small businesses?
I think it'll be massive. Per my earlier analogy, we like to think of Pinterest as less social and more search. And when you think about search, as a small business or a content creator or even a big brand, you have to think about search engine optimization, SEO, and search engine marketing, SEM. SEO is going to pay massive dividends, but when paired with SEM, taking out your credit card and putting a little investment to amplify your great content, to drive eyeballs to in a highly measurable, targeted way, it's a 1 + 1 = 3 effect. And the guys at Pinterest are just really smart. They've created a great tool. We've gotten to play a lot with the self-serve promoted pin, but even with some of our big brands, the more premium CPM promoted pins. And either one of these, it's an earned media game changer. Because think about, you've created a lot of amazing content that you pin, and you actually probably know the pieces of content that are doing the best organically. So pour a little lighter fluid on it, right? The targeting, there's some great pieces of targeting that are already built in terms of audiences and interests and demographics. Pinterest was just teasing in New York City at the Ad Exchanger Industry Preview that there's going to be a lot more targeting capability on Pinterest too. So,
wow,
it's a game changer, we think.
That's really, I think, really important. The only question is, and I get a lot of, I see a lot of people, and even just end users, not marketers. They see those promoted pins and are like, ugh, what are they doing? Is this going to be Facebook? What do you say to people like that?
I think, comparing Facebook and Pinterest, there's some absolute similarities to people's concerns, but it is kind of apples and oranges. If you think about the amount of content you consume on Facebook, you're reading through a lot of kind of text-based ads that are sometimes heavy image focused. On Pinterest, you're going through 10 to 20x the amount of content on your phone, going through high-quality images. We really think, and that Pinterest is going to take a more organic approach, right? Pinterest cares about the user experience. They're still in growth mode, trying to attract and retain users to use the platform more. So promoted pins and everything we've heard from them in the press and as we talk with their brands, they're advising brands to, it's not about a flashy advertisement. It's about useful, meaningful content that your brand is bringing to the consumer. And if you think about the way kind of SEM, SEO algorithms kind of work, we think it's going to be much of the same on Pinterest.
Gotcha. Do you have any like tips for small businesses? I saw you did a bunch of research for that article. Do you have any tips for small businesses for using or to optimize the promoted pins?
Sure. Before you go promote a pin, have you tried a couple of versions of that piece of content? So maybe you wrote a blog post, and what are the couple of different variations on that pin? On Pinterest, it's these fixed width rails. So what that means is if your image, the pin, because a pin is a picture with caption and a link, the image needs to be more vertically oriented, kind of portrait size, because you'll take up more visual real estate. Now that's not saying make a really tall banner that you have to go scrolling through the screen, but don't get that squinched up horizontal image. You're going to take up less visual real estate. Another tip that we give people is think about the copy itself. Is the copy selling something, or is the copy communicating the value that's going to be behind this pin, this content that this pin is linking to? And last but not least, we always encourage some sort of testing and learning with text overlays. You don't need to use them all the time, but as she's going through hundreds of pins, what's going to catch her eye? What's that headline? And then just continuously test and learn, and then start making your bets with promoted pins. But keep a really open mind to testing and learning.
Awesome. That's a great tip to test and learn. We talk about that quite a bit. I wanted to really quick bring up a comment from Elisa. I guess she does that. She makes some great different types of images and points them back to her same amount of content. She's great at that. And she goes, yes, Pinterest is search. So excited about upcoming promoted pin target options. And I think a lot of marketers are excited about that. And then, of course, Mike Alton, who's watching, says, Steampunk Star Wars. That rocks. So thanks, Mike, for stopping by. But anyway, I wanted to also, just real quick while we're paused a little bit, is to tell you guys there's one more day for the podcast launch. You could win a Kindle Fire HD and a $50 gift card. So go to manlypinteresttips.com/podcast and sign up, and it could be yours. So anyway, that was a quick little break for you guys to go over and do that.
Hey Jeff, will it be a Steampunk Star Wars Kindle?
Oh, that would be awesome, but no, it won't be. But that would be cool. Let's jump right in and talk about the big game. It's huge on Pinterest right now. I see all sorts of cool pins, and especially in the food and drink category. Pinterest just released an article yesterday stating that there are nearly 7 million pins and 5 million boards related to the Super Bowl. Most of these pins are in the food and drink category, as I mentioned, but there are also a lot of sport pins. Do you think that this trend of people going straight to Pinterest to get content instead of, say, like Google, it's on the rise, or is this just going to be kind of event-based or a quick little thing? Because I know a lot of people, for recipes, they don't even go search, chocolate chip cookies or whatever on Google anymore. They go straight to Pinterest and look to see what's going on there. So what are your thoughts on that?
I mean, I think Pinterest and Google are also a little bit different, right? I go do an internet search when I kind of know what I'm looking for, right? I'm looking for a very specific recipe. And if you think about our habits on search, whether it's Google or Bing, when you type in chocolate chip cookie, if it's not in the first result, you're going to do another search. That we've kind of trained ourselves to even learn how to do searches better. On Pinterest, it's, I want some sort of chocolate cookie. And you type in chocolate cookie, Pinterest might give you some guidance through guided search, but you're going to go through just tons of pieces of content and see what inspires you, or see what's popping the most, what's getting the most repins. So kind of the use case of looking up content on Pinterest, it's about lean back discovery versus lean forward intent-based search. So I think that's kind of the key difference. Whether or not I think habits are always going to shift and evolve. And I think Pinterest is creating a new mindset of discovery, which is much more open-ended and inspirational than, again, this intent-driven search.
Do you think that people, like when they're scrolling through that and looking, they're actually looking to see how many repins, or are they just looking to see, oh, that that image is more attractive than, say, the other one? Or do you think they're actually looking and saying, oh, that chocolate chip cookie recipe got, 500 repins? Do you think the end users are thinking that way?
I think it's a combination of things. If you think about left brain, right brain, when you're assessing the world, whether it's content or the internet or looking at cars in a parking lot, the first thing that's going to stop, hold, and close. The visual is going to be what arrests you and gets your attention. Maybe some form of a headline. And so that's why the visual's got to be great. Your photography's got to be great. The content in your opinion, it's got to look great. But the picture is the thing that pulls you in. Once I see that chocolate chip recipe, or maybe I dig in and start looking at chocolate chip cookie dough recipes, whether it's on Reddit or YouTube or Pinterest, if I'm looking for a music video to send to my friends, I sometimes say, oh, how many views did that one get? Because that's kind of voting from the public. Reddit, same thing. Repins, what makes repins so interesting is, again, those are votes from the community about, I found that interesting enough to save and share. So it's this kind of transparent signal, but it's the signal you see after you've kind of been arrested by the visual.
Gotcha. Well, this kind of leads into our next question, but this is a great one from Missy J. She says, what is the best way to get traffic to your Pinterest page? Is it by pinning more stuff on your page, or do you have to optimize your page by keywords? So what do you say to that?
I hate to say it's a combination, right? So in terms of pinning a lot of stuff to your page, you definitely want to pin a combination of your own owned content, stuff that's going to link back to your page, but you also, it's a lot of brands, a lot of small businesses, a lot of content creators, they might not have enough content. When I was at Dan and Yogurt, we had 200, 300 Greek yogurt recipes. We actually recommend brands should be pinning 5, 10, 15, 20 pins of content a day. Now, if we had pinned that much a day, we would have run out of content in a month. So, go to outside sources to pin content. Now, you got to be careful. Do you have the license and the permission to do that? So we created a content network that allows our partners to do it. And there are other ways you can do it. It's really about what your risk tolerance is, but Pinterest terms of service is pretty liberal about pinning stuff. Now, if you are pinning external content, though, you're going to be driving traffic to someone else's website. Again, that's not necessarily a bad thing, but because people might follow you because you're curating a lot of great content for them, such that they're going to be more receptive to see your brand-owned content. So that's the pinning lots of content answer. That's why it's valuable. Every piece of content you pin, you should be optimizing. Optimize the graphic, optimize the keyword. There are lots of tips and tricks. Should I use a hashtag? Should I not? We found that really doesn't make much of a difference. But ideal copy length. If you're literally just putting in the image file name inside of the pin copy, that's probably not as useful to the Pinterest user. What's so interesting about this? Tease to the user what sits behind this picture. Why should they care about this? Why should they repin it and save it for later?
Very good advice. That teasing element, I think, for all the top pinners, I see them using that all the time. They'll tell why they like it, or not just even the title. They'll even go farther than that and say, this is a call to action or something to that effect.
It's kind of like the BuzzFeeding of the internet, right? It's instead of saying here's a great fitness tip, say here's 6 great fitness tips to help you get in shape this season. Because what that says is there's more great stuff behind this pin. You should come check it out, or you should save it for later.
Very cool. And so that kind of leads to this next question that Missy J asked, and how can smaller businesses, maybe not even big brands, capitalize on events like the Super Bowl on Pinterest? What are some, they don't have the resources of, even like Dannon or something. Well, how can let's say a small local flower shop, I like to use those a lot, how can they capitalize on Pinterest? Or how can even a T-shirt shop, you make sports images, capitalize on Pinterest? What advice would you give them?
The mindset anyone on Pinterest should be thinking about is, if I'm a brand or I'm a business, you're still representing a curator of content on the internet. So what kind of content does your brand or business have the right to be curating? If you're a flower shop, that doesn't mean you only pin pictures of bouquets. You should be pinning copy about party ideas, home decor, places where flowers go, wedding ideas, wedding inspiration. So think about your brand. What does your brand have of value that could be relevant to the Super Bowl? It is going to come across as false if your brand tries to do something that is too far removed. But if there's some reason, and again, let's go back to the flower shop. When my wife and I go over to friends' houses, we take usually one of 4 things. If they have kids, we might take a book. If it's just our friends who are our age and they don't have kids, we're taking beer or wine. Sometimes if we're going to, say, maybe my parents' friends. I'm from Alabama. My parents have a lot. My wife and I, our parents both have a lot of friends in New York, and they often invite us over to come to dinner. I'm usually not taking beer and wine to their house, so I might take auntie or uncle, a bouquet of flowers to the Super Bowl party because I don't want them looking at me funny when I bring beer over.
Right.
So what's kind of the occasion-based mentality that your brand can be the curator of content for? Does that kind of answer the question?
Yeah, and I was going to point out a little bit later, but I saw an example that Pinterest was actually highlighting. Better Body Fitness, a fitness center in Wisconsin, they were curating healthy tailgate ideas to match its brand on health. So, there's so many of this junk food coming out, and they're really popular on Pinterest. They had a healthy tailgate board of recipes, and so I thought that was a really good example of taking your brand and kind of thinking creatively on, okay, I can still get in on the Super Bowl thing, but I'm going to kind of spin it for my brand.
Absolutely. This brand clearly stands for a healthier lifestyle, people wanting to make change and improvement in their life. And going to the gym is only one element of doing it. So healthier food options, healthier snack options, right? The food maybe you bring over to the party where everyone's going to be eating junk, bring the food that you can snack on. Instead of, drinking beer and soda, bring some watermelon juice or something, tasty and healthy and you can encourage other people, So the brand is getting credit now for being the curator of this broader, meaningful thing that their brand is trying to do. And Pinterest is a great vehicle to do that.
Awesome. I think also there is kind of there's a balance to it as well, because I see a lot of brands, only thing they will have are their stuff. It's only, it's only if they're insurance, they're only talking about insurance stuff. And I was encouraged a long time ago by Peg Fitzpatrick is to round out my boards, let people see who I am. I still pin mostly, Pinterest, social media kind of stuff. That's my main focus. But I still, like you, pin geek stuff or Star Wars stuff or whatever, because that tells people who I am. And so, do you agree that it's good for businesses to kind of have a balance in curation?
You definitely should have a balance. If you're one of those brands that has a ton of your own great organic content and you've got a content creation machine, we have a handful of clients that only pin their content. But what we believe in curating content is good for a couple of things. One, it lets you draft off the value of other content. It lets you build your brand as a curator of great content. But the other thing it lets you do is it lets you see what works. It's a very low-cost, low-friction way. So, we work with a really large brand that sells snacks and crackers. And they've got a handful of dip recipes, but there are a lot more dip recipes on Pinterest that could be relevant to them and other adjacent recipes and health tips and things like that. Rather than going off and creating the content themselves, they can test and learn with external content, see what's working, and then when they make the decision to go invest in creating more content, they have a really good idea what works and doesn't work for their brand. So it really is a balance.
Awesome. Well, I want to pull up this comment from my buddy Mike Alton. He goes, that's a great point, Raman. He says, brands need to curate content on Pinterest. That's been a big topic of discussion lately, sparked by a great article by Carolyn Riviera, where she pushes back on the idea that businesses need to curate content. Yet I think Pinterest is different, and that even on Pinterest, we'll see huge brands like Starbucks Coffee pinning content from all kinds of sources. So, let's see, of all kinds of sources, not just their own. He goes, so yes, definitely supplement your own content with pins and images and information from all kinds of other sources so that you're making boards an interesting resource. And I think that's the key, is you want to make your brand or your personal brand interesting.
And add value, because why is she following Starbucks? Well, she's following Starbucks. Well, Starbucks is an easy brand. It's a really cool brand. People want to associate with it. But pick another brand. Why should they follow you? These guys have something interesting to say, not just selling their product all the time. If you walk into a room and you're selling all the time, no one's going to want to talk to you. No one's going to want to engage with you. And again, Pinterest is about discovery and inspiration. So if your brand can help do that in a relevant manner that fits your brand personality, go for it.
Awesome. And I know this from one of your earlier reports you guys released, that the male user is, actually outpacing women in new signups on Pinterest. Do you think that's going to be a trend that's continuing, or do you think it's going to kind of level out short term, or do you think more men are going to go, oh, that's a cool platform, I won't tell anybody about it, but I'll start using it a lot more?
I think it's too soon to tell. It's growing very quickly because there haven't been a lot, and so I think men are starting to wake up to the opportunities, and both those men on Pinterest and Pinterest are really paying attention, trying to figure out what's working here. How is the usage and behavior different? How is it similar to a historically more female-dominated platform? What we're actually seeing in other markets outside of the U.S., where Pinterest is, Pinterest has been in the U.S. for 3 or 4 years now in terms of consumer adoption. In other countries around the world, it's just now getting to that critical mass, and we see other markets in the world where men are growing at the same clip as women.
Very interesting. Very interesting. And I know you guys at HollaG have some great data that you collect and you study, and those reports are awesome. I encourage everybody to go check those out on your website. But do you have any specific facts that you'd like to share with us where people are, what are they pinning or what they're looking for the big game that you can share with us?
Yeah, we actually just published our Super Bowl, or I shouldn't say Super Bowl, our HollaG football food and recipe trend report. If you go to ahollaG.com/football, you can download the report and take a look. But we saw some really interesting things. And some of these things, they're surprising, but you're like, oh, yeah, that kind of makes sense. Dips are far and away the most pinned Super Bowl related food. They're growing at about 4x a year. Versus the yearly average as the big game gets closer. And what's interesting about football is as we look across some of the top recipes, we use natural language processing to kind of see what the correlations were. We see this really heavy dip as football season picks up, and then this huge spike in January, and then it just completely drops off. And that spike in January, I'm a college ball guy more than an NFL guy, but so watching the BCS or watching all the bowl games or the Super Bowl, but then all those tailgating parties, those communal events where you have people over to watch the big game, it kind of peaks. So dips definitely far and away. The most popular dip, believe it or not, is queso and cheese dip. It's growing about 5x versus its yearly average during football season. And something I'd not heard of yet, white pizza dip makes up 5% of all dip pins. So look that one up and give it a try. Lastly, we see a really heavy correlation between pizza and football because those pins and repins really take a heavy spike in January, growing at about 3.5x the yearly average. So if you can take a look at the report, you'll be able to tease out lots of really interesting insights.
Awesome. Well, would you say that you don't want to look spammy and try to capitalize on the pin? You don't want to go, hey, I'm a flower shop. I'm going to put a dip recipe and hope to get a lot of traffic to my site. So should brands, look at this report and go, okay, there's stuff I can do. If I do pin some dip recipes, I've already had a board before. I mean, I know you don't want to look spammy and like you're really just, trying to game the system. But is there other things you can do that can kind of capitalize on? You see this report and you see this data. Okay, that's a pretty big deal. What do I need to do?
It's really about understanding what's trending and when things are trending. So if recipes aren't in your arsenal, if it doesn't make sense for your brand to be pinning recipes, then it might come across as spammy. But if you already kind of have a reputation and a relationship with your followers on Pinterest that I'm a brand that curates great recipe content, you can either pin the kinds of recipes that are trending during the Super Bowl in the manner that you might already be pinning recipe content and just kind of lean into the sort of things that are trending at this time of year, or create a seasonal board, just like a lot of brands create a holiday board, a Valentine's board, and you can repin content and reapply pre-existing content. But it really just comes down to how is your brand curating that content and helping him or her discover great content at just kind of the moments in their life when they're looking for it.
Awesome. I'm just going to let you guys know that if you check out CBS Sports, they've been adding some great boards to Pinterest, like Super Bowl memories, which I thought was really cool. They take some of the really old shots of some of the past Super Bowls and have a little story about it, which I thought was a great creative idea. Tailgating ideas, which is my favorite because they have tons of different recipes and fun things to try for a tailgating party. And they even CBS also actually did a Super Bowl Sunday, which is ice cream sundae recipes to Pinterest. So I thought that was really creative too. So I thought the way they're being creative on getting their brand out there was really something special. So so in kind of the same kind of thinking, since Pinterest is moving kind of more to a discovery engine, I mean it's a social network, but I think we all kind of agree it's more of a discovery kind of place. How can we optimize our pins to be more discoverable? I mean, you can even talk about a little bit about the new smart feed or whatever, but how is creating a pin, are there some just general practices that you need to do? You talked about the portrait size. Is there anything else that you think would help make our pins more discoverable by Pinterest?
Um, there are a lot of different signals that Pinterest is taking in. How many, whether it's how often are they being searched, how often are they being clicked on, how often are they being repinned. And so you really have to get into the psychology of the pinner, the Pinterest user. Why are they discovering content? Why are they clicking on content? So to me, it really boils down to, is your content discoverable and is it appealing? And all those things like cropping, okay, well that makes it more discoverable. Writing great copy, that makes it more appealing. A couple of other tips we've seen from a lot of brands doing, and again, you've got to kind of pick and choose these as it's appropriate to the piece of content that you're creating a pin for. But something we've seen is creating those step-by-step guides. Like, it's not every step of the process on how you make those chocolate chip cookies, but it's here's a shot of the ingredients, here's a shot of the prep, and here's the final product. Experiment around with a few things. That's really what's going to give you the most rewarding experience, because you're going to learn. You're going to learn by doing, and that's really what we encourage people to do on Pinterest. It takes a lot of rolling up your sleeves and testing and learning.
Yeah, I think it ties right into what Peg Fitzpatrick, who's I think in the audience, says that does it pass the reshare test? Is the stuff you're creating good enough for people to reshare? And so I think that's a good point too. Is okay, experiment. See what if would you actually share this content? Because a lot of times I think that we don't do that. We just throw up an image and expect it to be magic and happen. So
yeah, I mean, what would your mom, what would your sister, what would your brother, what would your best friend think about this piece of content if they saw it and they didn't know it was coming from you? I love what Peg says there. Another thing that we optimize on as well is time of day. So we do, because we're pinning hundreds of thousands of millions of pins, every single day for content partners and brands that we work with. You can look into pin scheduling. We've noticed a couple of trends that things like chocolate and dessert tend to trend really well after dinner, 8, 9, 10 p.m. Incidentally enough, fitness and exercise also does really well after dinner. That's a whole different class of people I don't understand. But we also see that quick and easy recipes start to pick up at 4, 5, 6 in the evening. And again, let's think about the psychology. Well, that's because my wife and I are on GChat trying to figure out what we're going to do for dinner tonight. We actually use a machine learning scheduling algorithm. So we look for trends on when we see things are doing well, and then we intelligently distribute and schedule them for our partners and users.
Wow, that's real. Getting inside the mind of the actual end user, that's really, I think, key. That's great. And I asked this to pretty much all my guests who've been on the show. What are some mistakes that you made that we could maybe learn from when you first started using Pinterest? What are some things that you did wrong that you go, man, you guys don't do this because I did it?
In our early days of the company, it was actually before we were focused on Pinterest. So Michael, our co-founder, had created almost like a fashion discovery platform. Think like Pandora for fashion. If you like this, you'll like that. And a lot of the fashion partners he was working with started telling him about this new thing called Pinterest. And he was just trying to grow users to his platform. So he tried a lot of things on Google, on Facebook, on Pinterest. He tried running a contest. He did some pin it to win it stuff. He made advertising-y looking pins. Oh, let me just pin the dress on a white backdrop. And what we saw about contests very specifically is you might get a short-term boost, but they don't work in the long term. Because if you think about it, who are the people, and when I was growing our Facebook follower base, when I was working at Dannon, we used to do coupons and contests and stuff, and all you get are deal seekers. These aren't people that care about your brand, they care about getting a coupon or winning a contest. Even Pinterest has kind of changed their terms of service last year to discourage these sort of contests and kind of gaming the system. Right. The more you try to game the system versus authentically adding value, you might get some short-term gain, but it's not going to pay off in the long run. You might get a lot of followers, but then you'll notice your repins start to plummet because you've got a lot of followers that choose not to engage with you because all they wanted was the coupon or the contest. So you discourage that. Imagery that is kind of more flat in nature tends not to do as well as great photography or shows the product or the recipe or whatever the tip or piece of content you're trying to show in context. So those were some of the early mistakes we made a few years ago, and that frankly guided so much of our product strategy on the thing that we're building at HollaG, the service that we're providing to our brands and content partners.
Awesome. So this is the Manly Pinterest Tip Show. So do you have any advice for guys who may just be getting started on using Pinterest?
Yeah. one thing that really I noticed kind of kicked my Pinterest usage up a couple of notches is install, if you're using Chrome or Safari or Firefox, go get the Pinterest Chrome extension. What's real, or the browser extension, because what's really cool about that, when I'm looking up stuff about the new Star Wars movie or looking at concept art from old Star Wars movies or comic book stuff or recipes, whenever I hover over an image, a pin it button automatically appears, and I can right-click and pin it. So now what you're doing is you're putting content into Pinterest, and what Pinterest does, as soon as you pin a piece of content, it says, hey, this piece of content was actually already pinned by this person to this geek board. Are you interested? And I'm like, yeah, sure, I'll follow that. Because now Pinterest is learning about the kind of stuff I like and suggesting things I want to follow. Getting the Pinterest mobile app for guys, if you're not using it already, I'd highly recommend it. Sometimes when I'm riding the train into Manhattan every day, I use it. And it's such a frictionless experience to not necessarily put content into Pinterest, but to kind of lean back and just look at lots of great pieces of content. The last thing I'd say is think of Pinterest as a search engine. Try the next few times you need to look for something that might not be what's the weather in Cincinnati today. Try using Pinterest to do the search and kind of play around with it a little bit.
Awesome. That's great. That's great advice. So, last question for you. Where can we find out about you and HollaG and more of your services?
Yeah, well, obviously, HollaG.com is a great place to go. A couple other things you can do. If you go to HollaG.com/research, you can download our media consumption study. Every year we run a study where we poll consumers and we ask about their habits and practices. Some of the insights about men as a growing demographic on Pinterest can be found there, and some learnings we've had on how people feel about promoted pins and the different types of categories. So that's HollaG.com/research. And if you want to see the football trends report that we mentioned, you can go to HollaG.com/football. Follow us on Twitter if you want to hear about the latest and greatest from us, and just keep an eye out for us. You might be hearing about more from us very soon.
Awesome. Well, I sure appreciate you stopping by, Raman, and that was just some great stuff. Some great. I'm gonna have to watch this again and take notes because I'm running the show so much I can't always do that. So I'm excited to go back and kind of dig in a little bit deeper. Thanks so much, everyone who showed up and left comments today. I really appreciate it. I'd love it for anyone who hasn't yet to go to manlypinteresttips.com, sign up for my email newsletter, be a part of the email community where we can share these great shows, when they're going to be, maybe ask some questions of you guys, what would you like to see on future shows, but I'd really appreciate it if you would go and do that, because we're always adding testosterone one pin at a time. Thanks for watching, everybody. I'll see you next time.